just thought I'd have a bit of space.
I'm happy for it to be permanent if you like.
No.
It's not joking.
Well, it's not here, I can spread out.
The area.
I quite like your part here. You're not going to speak to the audience. Like Tory. So you're
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, but you can.
What am I going to do? Repeat what you've said?
Councillors, we might make a start. 7 o'clock, a good meeting's a quick meeting. Must be a TV show on somewhere. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight to this council meeting on Tuesday, 2nd of October 2018. And in the spirit of reconciliation, before we begin this meeting, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which Wyndham is being built, and we pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. If you stand for the welcoming prayer, please, or opening prayer. We pray for guidance in the council's decision making to achieve the best outcomes for the people of Wyndham. Thank you. Please be seated. I would like to welcome members of the gallery, press, councillors and staff here tonight for this ordinary council meeting. And some of you may have seen the notices in the foyer, but for those of you who didn't, I would like to make you aware of the following. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the internet. The recording will be archived and made available on Council's website. Whilst all care has been taken to ensure that your privacy is maintained, please be aware that your presence may be recorded. Item number 2, apologies and requests for leave of absence. Madam CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Tonight we have 2 apologies. An apology is noted from Councillor Walter Villagonzalo, who, as you're aware, Mr Mayor, is on an approved leave of absence. We also have an apology this evening from Councillor Heather Marcus, who was unable to be here tonight. Mr Mayor, there's also a number of requests for a leave of absence, and in fact the proposal here is that these be granted for this evening, so I'll just read these through now. That leave of absence be granted for Councillor Walter Villagonzalo from the 31st of October to the 25th of November 2018 inclusive. That leave of absence be granted for Councillor Aaron Arn from the 31st of October to the 25th of November 2018 inclusive. That leave of absence be granted for Councillor Intaj Khan from the 13th of November to the 23rd of November 2018 inclusive, and also that approved leave of absence for Councillor Mayor Shaw be amended as previously approved to the 3rd of October to the 8th of October 2018 inclusive. So, Mr Mayor, you'll need a mover and seconder for those.
Thank you, Madam CEO. So, councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor John Gibbons, seconder, please. Councillor Khan. Discussion, councillors?
Yes.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just briefly, in relation to my leave, considering some of the commentary I've seen in the local paper on Facebook about this, I just wanted to make a note that, one, whilst councillors don't need to advise why they are taking a leave of absence, I think from my point of view it's important just to let the community know that my leave of absence is to spend some time with my son in the last week of the school holidays. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Any further discussion, councillors? No further discussion. I'll put it to vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 3, declaration by councillors of disclosure of conflict of interest, conflicting personal interest in any item on the agenda tonight. Councillors, Councillor McElhaney, gee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 6.4.3, I'll be declaring an indirect conflict. Section 78 on the amended conditions planning permit application in regard to the 6.4.2, the planning permit application in regards to the additional 10 electronic gaming machines due to my son working in a neighbouring venue.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Item 4, confirmation of minutes of previous meeting, and the motion is that the minutes of the special council meeting held Tuesday 28th August 2018 as prepared and circulated be confirmed, that the ordinary council meeting held on Tuesday 4th September 2018 as prepared and circulated be confirmed, and that the special council meeting held on Tuesday 18th of September 2018 as prepared and circulated be confirmed. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor John Gibbons, seconder. Councillor Tony Hooper. Discussion, councillors? No discussion. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Deputations and presentations. I have some work to do. So, as I turn it on, probably a good idea, wouldn't it? Yes. As I said before, item 5, deputations and presentation mayoral youth awards. Wynnum City is proud to recognise the fantastic achievements and contributions made by young people in this community, and we certainly do have a lot of them, as we well know. Each quarter, a number of young people aged 12 to 25 are presented with a mayoral youth award, which includes a certificate of recognition and a grant of $500. The award recognises achievements in 3 categories, which are sport, arts and culture, community service, volunteering and leadership. The applications are assessed by a panel that consists of the Wynnum City Mayor, the Youth Project Officer, Youth Services staff members, and and young people from the Wynnum Youth Task Force. Recipients of the award also go into the running to be named Wynnum's Young Achiever of the Year. Tonight I have the pleasure in making one presentation. 2 have not been able to make it. And that one presentation is to, whose name I can't forget because I have a son called Nathan. Nathan Smith. So Nathan, if you'd like to come up here, please. You have to stand up here with me. I used to have hair like that once. I did too. So, yeah, well, it was a long time ago, you know. So Nathan is being recognised for his contribution in sport. He's a passionate baseball player. He's 15 years old. Only 15. How tall? Taller than me. And lives in Wynnum Vale, good suburb. Nathan has been chosen to represent his local charter, which is what a baseball club is called, in 8 Victorian state baseball championships within the last 5 years. The most recent being the Twins charter team, which won the 2018 Victorian Championships, resulting in the team representing Victoria in the 2018 Australian Senior League Championship. Nathan was one of 60 baseballers selected from an Australia-wide tryout to attend a Major League Baseball Invitational, where he received coaching for some of the industry's best Australian and international coaches. Nathan is a supportive and positive team player who constantly encourages his less experienced teammates and works to build team camaraderie and is always helping others. I, along with my fellow councillors and officers, would like to offer our congratulations to Nathan on your achievement in sport. Would you like to say a few words, Nathan? Don't just say a few words.
I'd just like to thank you for the award, and I'd like to thank Mum and Dad for taking me around everywhere. That's pretty much it.
That's pretty it. You nailed it. You got the important bits because, you know, Mum and Dad not taking you around, it makes it pretty difficult. So we do have something I prepared earlier, which is your award and a cheque for $500. So congratulations. Can you nail it? Go on. Thank you very much. Good. Well done. Well done. Right. Moving right along. Item number 6, councillors, is petitions. 6.1.1, petition 18/05, installation of a speed hump in Grassbird Drive between Boardwalk Boulevard and Sunnybank Drive, Point Cook. Report commences on page 10 with a recommendation on page 11. Nil attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor McElhaney. A seconder, please. Councillor Hooper. Discussion, councillors? As it's noting, thank you. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 6.1.2, response to petition 18/04, parking on Service Road on Princess Highway, Werribee. Report commences on page 12, recommendations on page 13.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to propose an amendment.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. I'd like to propose an amendment to the recommendations. I'd like to amend point 3 to read, introduce parking restrictions for Princess Highway Service Road car spaces following consultation with relevant landowners.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I agree that we do need a long-term parking strategy for the Civic Centre and that staff members have put pressure on parking at the Civic Centre and staff have had to resort to parking around the Civic Centre. We recently had issues with Princess and Queen's Court and the issue was raised with ward councillors. This has since been resolved following consultation with residents. However, these parking restrictions have put pressure on the service road on the other side of council. While council staff should not be held to a higher standard than any other resident of this city, staff should not be parking in the on-street parking spaces that have been paid for by individual businesses, and I hope that they aren't. The report states that these are sealed and marked accordingly and are not for general public and are not dedicated to any one business, but they should not be used by council employees. The intent of those car parks are for the people who are using the services of the businesses on the service road, which is why I have proposed the amendment. We can't hold our staff to a higher standard, and yet if there is a car space available to park in and it is an all-day park, they are entitled to park in it. The only way we fixed the issues with Queen's Court and Princess's Court was by consulting with residents on appropriate restrictions. Parking at the Civic Centre may also be an issue for residents and ratepayers who need to come to council to do business and may be finding it hard to find a car parking space, which is why decentralising our services to community centres has been extremely important and can be a more convenient way to do business with council. I'll be frank that I believe that this problem is of our own making and a quicker short-term solution needs to be found here. I support the suggestion of creating a one-way circular road and the expanding the car park at the rear of the SES building to create 70 additional spaces. A park and ride bus trial from the Cherry Street car park is, in my view, a waste of money. The car park is about 100 metres up the road and I would have thought, in the spirit of health and well-being, people can walk. Which leads me to Cherry Street car park more broadly. I think we have put businesses in the CBD, including those in the service road, at a disadvantage. By opening up the West End car park to everyone for free, which I agree with, Cherry Street still needs a business permit. Seeing it is still underutilised, maybe we need to look at what we might be able to do with this car park and what other options we might have. I look forward to seeing the results of the consultation with the businesses in late 2018-2019 for the planned reconstruction of the Princess Highway Service Road. And if the amendment passes, the results of the consultation for parking restrictions until the reconstruction of the service road takes place, but an issue we can resolve in the best interests of all parties. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillors, are there any further speakers? No further speakers? I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Abstaining, councillor?
Yeah. Mr Mayor, look, I'm not sure how this service lane car parking goes, but I do like to put a notice that I own a property on 180 Princess Highway, so I would like to declare a conflict of interest, so I would not vote for it. I'm abstaining for it.
You should have done that when I asked you previously, but I take your point.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just put a notice if you want to make a difference.
Okay. Well, we've already done it.
You haven't actually put it to vote.
Oh, we haven't? Well, then, if you leave the room, that'll be a good idea. Yeah, we haven't already done it, is it?
So you just need to put the alternative.
It's not finalised, no.
So, councillors, I put the alternate as read, indicating now, obviously, that Councillor Khan has left the chamber due to a now identified conflict. So, all those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 6.2, strategic reports, Victoria. Item 6.2, strategic reports, 6.2.1, Victorian Auditor General's Office Performance Audit 2018-19 report commences on page 18 with the recommendation on page 18. Attachments to the document is printed in a separate document, page 3, commencing on page 3. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor McElhaney, seconder, Councillor Hooper. Discussion, councillors. Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Wyndham City was selected as one of 5 councils to take part in a performance audit investigating the delivery and performance of government services. And I'd like to say that Wyndham City was found to be one of 2 councils audited that have the strongest commitment to continuous improvement. Other councils that were involved with this investigation or audit was Bayside, the City of Wodonga, Indigo and Moira Council. A performance audit entails how well public money is spent, and the Victoria Auditor General's Office selected us to participate. The 2 main legislative drivers of improvement is the Local Government Act Best Value Principles and the current constrained fiscal environment we now work with the Fair Go rate system. The objective of this audit was to determine whether Council has an effective plan and delivers efficient services. I can say it's important to note that in the past year, prior to this report or being asked to participate in this report, Wyndham City went through a productivity and efficiency program and saved $1 million. As we know, Mr Mayor, Wyndham is experiencing and will continue to experience exponential growth, of which ultimately impacts service delivery and requires Council to constantly review and improve its approach to service delivery in a constantly changing environment. It's not easy building a city that is going to double in the next 15 to 20 years. We have 95 babies, and I recently read in the paper we had over 7,000 building permits coming through the city per annum, with a value of government projects hitting $2.3 billion worth of works. This report was tabled in Parliament recently and identifies the strength of this council and also the number of opportunities for improvement in best practice in delivering local government services. Wyndham City is already using service cost methodology that aligns with local government 2014 best practice, has robust framework of monitoring the impact of improvements and a comprehensive service catalogue. It is important to note that this council, despite many challenges of growth, internal, external audits, and now leading in this performance audit, we as a council are committed to continuous improvement and efficiency and will continue to work with Vargo. The Auditor General accepted an invitation last year to sit on the audit, to come to one of our Audit and Risk Committee meetings to share his vision, and we hope to invite him to Wyndham again for councillors to obtain a better understanding of his role. I would like to thank, and a special thank you to the CFO Binda Gokhal and her department for the huge amount of work that was put in on the performance audit, which was over and above the usual regulatory requirements of budget, long-term financial plans, council vision and council plan. It's been a busy year with the term of the audit chair coming to a close and the reappointment of a new chair of the Audit and Risk Committee and a reappointment of our internal auditors. So overall, a job well done by our organisation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Councillor, any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Rahn.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. As fellow Councillor McLeany mentioned, managing one of the fattest municipalities in this country is not that easy. But I'm pleased to see the efforts that our CEO, staff, and councillors have put into supporting the sort of organizational and process changes that improve the level and quality of services, amenities, and infrastructure that we provide to the community. I support the proposed responses from Council to the Auditor General's audit recommendations that outlined in the report. I'm pleased that staff have identified ways that we can continuously improve our efficiency, evaluation, and other processes that are outlined in this report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Arndt. Councillors, any further speakers? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think Councillor McElhinney has summed it up quite well in terms of the dense detail of the report. But what I will say in relation to the Fair Go framework is this is precisely the sort of example as to why growth councils should be enabled, empowered, allowed to consider growth rates beyond the rate capping environment that we currently find ourselves in. And the audit obviously looks at predominantly services provided, but taking into context some of the issues that we face in coming years, where there will be cost blowouts undoubtedly around infrastructure due to the added pressures of the Victorian and federal government infrastructure rollout. And we know that from the market forces that are at play for future budgets, that will put considerable pressure on the capital works program over the next couple of years, and then having the overlap of a rate capping environment that doesn't account for the infrastructure needs to the extent that we're going to have these market forces in place. So this audit, which I agree, certainly commend the staff in putting this together, shows very fiscally responsible council, a council that has made $1 million worth of savings to demonstrate that where they can, they will. A council that clearly has ticked all the boxes of VARGO, the same authority in some respects, which hopefully would, when it comes to an Essential Services Commission, also endorse the notion that where there is infrastructure issues in the future around a growth rate, that council should be allowed to consider a rate that does cover the medium to long-term costs associated with that infrastructure. And indeed, we know that there is a consultancy report that was done by the Essential Services Commission that basically indicated a number of areas where if councils could fulfil both in population growth and demand, that they should be allowed to introduce a growth rate in their future budgets. So this report, this audit, will assist greatly in that argument. We intend to put that argument to the MAV to encourage both the opposition and the Victorian government to consider loosening the legislation to make it a bit more evidence-based around certain councils being able to commit to growth rates. And I think this report, this audit, these results will assist greatly in doing that. So I thought I would put that on the record. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gillian. Any further speakers, councillors? Before I put it to the vote, there's a couple of things I'd just like to mention. I think it just goes to show that this council is fiscally prudent and has consistently identified savings, irrespective of what's been set in place by legislation. It's as a matter of practice. So I thought I'd just like to mention that. I'd also like to put the spotlight on someone else, and that's Miss Natalie Walker, our Head of Policy and Strategy Impact. Natalie and her staff have certainly had oversight of this, and for that we thank her. So,
Agreed.
Yeah. Vote. Yes, sorry. So all those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 6.2.2, Festivals and Events Framework. The report commences page 23. Recommendation is on page 23. Attachments are printed in a separate document, pages 104 to 132. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Intage Khan. Seconder, Councillor Henry Barlow. Discussion, councillors? No discussion. I'll put it to the vote. We've got to be quick. Councillor Arndt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a Harrison Ward councillor representing the ward with the highest population, people speak regularly with me about the need for more community meeting, festivals, and event spaces. Of course, council is not the only provider of festivals and events, and so it would not be sensible for council alone to spend tens of millions of dollars every year to meet what is a wider community need. I will come back to this issue on the current high levels of use of council's community meeting and event spaces in a moment. I'd like to first acknowledge that this is the first time we've ever had such an important festival and events framework. Given the broad range of community and economic benefits for the city, it is no surprise that community support for festivals and events is so strong. Mr. Mayor, I have been advocating for better planning and provisioning of community meeting and event spaces as well, the part of this framework since before being elected to council, and certainly more actively since. It's no secret that we can't build community centers quickly enough to keep pace with the growth we are experiencing, nor can we refurbish existing facilities as quickly as we would like. This is because council has so many calls on the budget across a whole range of essential services. Nevertheless, I'm pleased that this framework will ensure we have a better information and data on current and future use, including unmet needs, so we can consider this when making future decisions about community meeting and events spaces. I am also pleased that the framework also allows us to better master plan and find partnerships with other partners to provide these facilities in future. I fully support the proposed Year 1 and Year 2 actions 3.1 through to 3.9, as they allow us to map larger event precincts and spaces to determine gaps, opportunities, and investments required to deliver the festival and events framework objectives. I'm also looking forward to making more informed decisions in the future about where is the best investment, invest ourselves or partner with others. People in the Harrison Ward are wanting to engage with their communities more and more. And the more we plan for future needs and how we can address unmet demand, the better. I encourage the community to provide us comments and suggestions on the framework over the next 28 days, start from tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Arndt. Councillor, is there any further speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm happy to support this report because the city of Wyndham has changed dramatically over the last probably decade to 15 years. There are many festivals and events being held now, far more than when I first came onto council back in 1997. And one of the things that we need to ensure is, and it says this on the first sentence on page 23, this report presents a draft of Wyndham City's first ever festival and events framework. And obviously, because of the number of events and festivals that we do have, we need to have a document that's actually going to form the framework so everybody understands what their responsibilities and what the guidelines are of actually running these events. I look forward to the public consultation, the exhibition of this draft report, and look forward to see what the community has to say.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillors, any further speakers? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I certainly just want to make one point in relation to this framework, and I support the notion of us looking to increase for future budget allocations the sort of money that will be required to attract the sort of live festivals and events and types of bands that are necessary to make our area an important economic region in this state. So that will be an important consideration of this framework, but something I do want to put on the record. I think that will be a worthwhile investment, obviously premised on a cost-benefit basis, but nevertheless an important part of what this festival and event framework is, because we are going to need to invest ratepayer money to increase the likelihood of attracting the types of festivals and events we want in our city. And I think that's a good thing for the economic benefits of our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillor, any further discussion? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think we already know that many events already happening, such as a week picnic, Wyndham's Children's Week picnic, Paid Expo, Winter Street Party. Also, though, the Wyndham learning events such as, a lot of already happening, Virama, Holi, Eid, Diwali. There's a many events. I think this council, I've seen since I became a councillor, seeing that, how they've supported, and I've seen the budget have been increased. So this is a really true reflection of the community's need, how the council is supporting it. And we know that the President Park, almost, there's a lot of phone calls coming and they want to book all events. The council has been extremely supportive of many events. And I'm proud to see that the new Tuneside Park, which is Wyndham Parks, now going to add extra 5,000 persons, one event space at Wyndham Park when that park gets built. So there will be more space, just not the park. We would definitely need a bigger space so we can host a few more events. And I do acknowledge that, Mr. Mayor, my kids were saying this morning that let's go with the Royal Melbourne show. So they were just the sort of events actually catches the kids' eyes. And I think we should look at example like a Royal Melbourne show, something like that could be Wyndham Children's Show or something like that. We can attract a lot of people from other side. So the kids during the holidays, they can, school holidays, they can enjoy. But definitely we got coastal, we got a great Wyndham Harbour, so we can host something or close to on K Road, something like that where we can make internationally. So I think I'm supporting this draft. I'm looking forward to some new ideas, what community thinks. So that ending, we're interested now if the public can make lots of suggestions. This is a starting from tomorrow and have 28 days to finish this draft, comment what they're wishing to see what council can do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it to vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.2.3, Draft Community Precinct Master Plans, Tarneit North and Truganina. The report commences on page 26 with a recommendation on page 27. Attachments are printed in a separate document at page 133 to 200. Councillors, can I have a recommendation? A mover, please. Councillor Hooper. Seconder, please. Councillor Khan. Discussion, councillors. Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the motion to seek the authorisation from the Minister for Planning to prepare the amendment C232 for the Wyndham Planning Scheme. I do so because, in my view, this planning scheme amendment will strengthen the objectives of the Truganina Employment Precinct. The objectives are outlined in the report, but they are worth summarising. This is because the contribution the precinct plays to
Point of order. I think Councillor's got the wrong item.
Oops.
Tarneit North and Truganina. Missed by half an inch. That's okay. Thank you, Councillor.
It's not a question of relevance.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes,
I'll acknowledge that. Sorry.
Yep. He was just testing us to see if we were listening.
Thank you, Mr. Gilligan.
Good. Yes. Now.
At least you know I'm listening to you.
Yes. So now, do we have any comment or discussion, councillors? Councillor Ahn.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Mayor. I'm delighted to be supporting the recommendation to place this draft community precinct master plan for Tarneit North and Truganina on public exhibition for 28 days. People know that I am a strong supporter for council looking at ways that we can do things not only differently, but also creatively to bridge the infrastructure gap that we have for community facilities in Wyndham. I note that as well as the proposed outcomes, which I think should receive strong community support, it is the process of how we've come to where we are that is just as important as the outcomes. The community precinct master planning process have broken with the traditional ways of doing things, where open space and community facilities, including family services, are planned separately. This master planning process brings together the planning of active and passive open spaces with our planning for integrated family centers. Given the strong young demographics in Wyndham and particularly the young families moving to our new growth areas, the common sense of this approach is very clear. I fully support the strong principles we've used to guide this new planning process as outlined in the agenda. Our recent budget decisions for 2018 to 2019 means we can move quickly on future planning for these precincts following community feedback. We will also need to lock in the final funding mix for this integrated family center, open space reserves and pavilions projects. And I hope the state government will also come to the party in funding these projects from grants, as contributions and levies will not fully cover the cost. Before I close, Mr. Mayor, I also want to acknowledge that not every community facility can include all the use that are needed due to limited land size and other factors. However, I do need to represent the many people who speak to me about our sports, meeting, and festival spaces to say that I sincerely hope that we continue to look at and meet demand in our city for highball sports, for example, badminton and table tennis, as well as more community meeting and festival spaces. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Arndt. Councillors, any further discussion? Oh, sorry. Is there any speakers against this motion? Any further discussion? Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say, as we said in the report, it's a new approach to precinct master planning in growth areas. And it's not traditionally, we've looked at projects in silos. Now we're looking at a whole range of areas. And it just goes to show, we've just talked about the Vargo report. This report is in line with our Wyndham 2040, our city plan and the numerous other policies, but it also strengthens our efficiency and identifies more ways to work with less and be more efficient. So it's just it's a perfect example of continuous improvement in that area.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Hi.
How's it going, mate?
Councillors, any further discussion? Oh, well, there's a few, but I did spot Councillor Hooper first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I've got my notes ordered now. Sorry about that. Look, I think it's actually important to look, and as
Are you on the right item? Do you want to
I'm on the right item.
table it if you like?
Sorry, that's all good. Now, look, I think Councillor McElhaney has pointed out a very important point to note, which is a helicopter view of what is planned for these sites, looking at the exact needs of that community from a sporting and from an integrated family services point of view, and how they'll actually incorporate the school adjacent to those sites and what they'll do in an overarching theme around that community. When you look at the proposed items of it, baseball, soccer, tennis, all within a facility, within an incorporated centre, is an absolutely brilliant way of approaching multiple sports at the one time and having an understanding of what the community expects at that same time. These reports will go out to the community for their input. And that's a key thing to remember. We're not looking at piecemeal parts such as the parking coming on, or the courts coming on, or the integrated family centre, or where the sports facility will go. We're going to have a helicopter view of the whole lot, so the community can see from the start exactly what we're planning and how it will be rolled out. So I think getting their input on this is absolutely vital, and they'll be able to see, instead of a jigsaw puzzle, exactly what is in store. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Gilligan, did you? Yeah. I saw a number of hands up, so I'm sort of grabbing them. Yep.
Look, just very briefly, I agree with Councillor McElhaney's point around the service integration that we as on a local government level are delivering, whether it's in the sport and recreation area to the provision of early childhood education. I still remain quite concerned around the service mix of private and public schools. And again, I reiterate those concerns given we are well above the average in terms of private school provision in a number of these PSPs versus public school provision. And I raise that for a number of reasons, whether it be the importance of having choice, to also making sure that the Victorian government delivers affordable education, to also ensuring that ratepayers and taxpayers get their fair share of tax that they're paying in the city. And I do continue to have concerns about that ratio, and that sort of intermingles in relation to the master plan, making reference to the schools that are being provided. But it's something that I will continue to investigate and hold views on as we move forward with a number of our PSPs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gillian. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, just briefly, I also agree with Councillor McElhaney and some of the other councillors that have spoken here tonight. In particular, around the provision of services, which I know does state that it includes but is not limited to kindergarten, maternal health, maternal child health and family services, considering the pressure that a number of our family services has in this city. I think it will be really important to look at how we integrate those properly and what other services we actually can be providing, but also that the delivery of active open space and recreation infrastructure and delivery of any other open space is actually done in line with the policies and strategies that we have already discussed and agreed on, which is the Wyndham Sports Strategy 2045 and the Wyndham Open Space Strategy 2045. Those infrastructure facilities for sport and open space must be in line with those two policies and strategies. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. And councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a great piece of work councillors putting for the comments for the community. We know that there's two PSPs, the Tarn North PSP and Truganina South East PSP. In these PSPs, we have a 12.6 hectares of active open space, and second one 10.24 active space on Truganina South. Now, as one PSP plan, is quite often you've seen that, when you have active open space in community facilities, you will modern planning, you will see that the government schools opposite to or close by, and also the private schools. This is what just a demonstration of it. This PSP was planned before. The good thing about this whole document is talks about how many circuits. So we're going to have Tarnit North Master Plan, which includes 3 soccer fields, an overlying cricket oval, 6 tennis court, 1 softball diamond, 2 softball, and list goes on and on. I think this is really a great plan, what council is doing it. A similar thing goes on Truganina Master Plan, which is 3. The good thing about it, this is entire, which is Truganina Master plans talks about, I think we're now also looking at, a shelter, barbecues and public facilities. And Mr. Mayor would like to see that public can make a comment, because quite often we see that the playgrounds where we see that, there are some public toilets are not enough. So I think now is an opportunity for people to put forward, if they were interested, see how their community plans, community precinct master plans and other ovals looking, if they were interested. This is listed on page 31 of 180. I think it's a great document acknowledging it, and it's obviously though aligned with the vision of the Wyndham 2040. And the good thing about it is now it's going to be funded by 3 major parties. We'll get money, DCP, we'll get money from the DCP and Relevant Development Contribution Plan. Also the community, which is CIL, Community Infrastructure Levy Funds as per DCP, and the grant which is will receive hopefully from the state government, as they should be funding all these projects. Now, if you look at them, Mr. Mayor, on 32, these 2 projects, one is at Tarnit North, will cost $20 million to the city.
1 minute, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. $20 million to the city, which is just show that, how we are using funds and how we're spending on reserve pavilions, car park and all, and similar way the Truganina will cost 15 millions. Now, initially now we're looking funding for $405,000 will be used for the Tarnit North to do the master design. So this, we're talking about the master design, they're going to cost some money. That will be $405,000 for the Tarnit North, and followed by the Truganina, which is detailed design, just a design, and the work will remain later on, will cost us $680,000. So council have already committed. So I'll look forward to seeing that great work. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, any further discussion? No further discussion. Put to vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.3, I beg your pardon. Policy and advocacy, there is nil. 6.4, strategy and town planning. 6.4.1, Truganina Employment Precinct Structure Plan, Planning Scheme Amendment C23. So the Planning Scheme Amendment C232. Report commences page 35, recommendation on page 36. Councillors, can I thank you, Councillor Hooper, and a seconder, Councillor Khan. Discussion, councillors?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No discussion? Oh, just kidding.
As I've done my reading already and got my notes prepared, I shall read out from where I started or when I finished off. The objectives are outlined in this report, but are worth summarising. This is because the contribution that the precinct plays to Wyndham's economy cannot be understated, and hence my eagerness to get onto it. Some councils and communities would dearly love an employment precinct of this size and kind. And so summarising the objectives of the Dragonina Employment Precinct, the precinct will provide diverse employment opportunities for both Wyndham and the wider Western Metropolitan region of Melbourne. It will host thriving industrial uses that extend the West Industrial Node and of course will provide for a wide range of business and jobs. The precinct will comprise quality industrial park developments with a logistic bias and have strong links to industry activity centres and future high-order services. Mr Mayor, I am pleased to see that the proposed planning scheme amendment will ensure that any past changes to land use zones by the state government that could weaken these objectives will be addressed. Essentially, we have to protect the precinct from the sorts of non-industrial uses that do not complement these employment objectives. There's an old saying that if you don't really know what you have until it is gone. So I am pleased that Council is being proactive in trying to protect something that ensures Wyndham's future that can be more balanced, economically viable and socially just. And just as importantly, that future jobs are diverse and they serve the needs not only of local residents, but also those who travel to and from Wyndham each day for work. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillors, any further discussion? No. Yes?
Just very briefly.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. No, just kidding.
To summarise, I think, the points of Councillor Hooper, I think this is quite a good outcome for us should this be implemented, because it will give us greater control over what is a very scarce portion of land that we have around the industrial zones of our city. And we obviously are increasingly concerned about running out of industrial land across our city. So the land that we have in established parts of our municipality will be protected for the very purpose that they should be there for. And I think that that is a terrific result in implementing that. It will create increased job density, which is so important for our city. So I thought I'd put that on the record. This is a very, very good idea. So well done putting this together.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, no speakers against. So any further speakers for? No further speakers. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.4.2, Councillor McElhaney, you've indicated on this item that you have a conflict.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
You're most welcome. Exit stage left. Planning permit application, installation of additional 10 electronic gaming machines, buildings and works, alteration and liquor licence, gambling areas and reduction in car parking at the Tigers Clubhouse at 66 to 74 Old Geelong Road, Hoppers Crossing. The report commences on page 42, a recommendation on page 43, and attachment are printed in a separate document commencing on page 200. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Barlow. A seconder. Councillor Shaw. Discussion, councillors.
For or against?
The first one will be for. So any discussion, councillors? Any discussion against? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Whilst every councillor considers all planning applications on their merits, in this instance, I believe that this particular planning application still remains not in the best interest of Wyndham, and so therefore I intend to oppose the proposition. The latest gambling results, pokies results, came out last Friday, and it appears that Wyndham is about, on average, 10% higher than our record pokies losses last year, which, if that rate continues for the next couple of years, will put us well and truly in the next 5 to 10 years the highest LGA in the state of Victoria with pokies losses. This is precisely why I was opposed to the initial application before it went to the VCGLR. I still have a view that it does have a net detriment on the community, that it should not be supported, and therefore intend to oppose the permit as it is currently formed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any further speakers for the motion? Any further speakers against? Against? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, as fellow councillor Josh Gilligan have said that, this is something not in a better interest of the community, has been a massive losses, people, suffering through that if they engage themselves in this kind of activities and become addicted gamblers and all sorts of things. I think we had enough machines in the area to be utilized, and adding 10 more electronic machines will, as a report have said, that we're already on 10% more compared to other areas. I think they're not going to do anything good to the community. I think the club like this, I probably think they can explore different avenues to make revenue, but revenue from this 10 electronic gambling machine would not be appropriate for the wider community's interest, even though there are already enough machine in the area. It's just supporting this is just like adding a more that fire to the existing already problems we're facing in Wyndham, and there are a lot of people here not living in stress and so many things. I think this is just not the community interest. Therefore, I would be asking my fellow councillors not to support this application, just not because it's a club, because it is not interest of the better community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Khan. There being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Motion's lost. Councillor McElhaney. Item 6.4.3, amended conditions planning permit application WIP 10331/17. No? Development of the land with 16 units, associated car parking, landscaping, and 16 lot subdivision and common property in accordance with endorsed plans. 200 Featherbrook Drive, Point Cook. The report commences on page 55 with a recommendation on page 56. Attachments to commence on page 60. Councillors Canova, mover, please. Councillor McElhaney. Seconder, please. Councillor Khan. Discussion, councillors. No discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.5 other reports. 6.5.1 Wyndham State of the Environment Report 2017-2018. Report commences page 79, recommendation on page 80. Attachments printed in a separate document commencing on page 277. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Khan. Seconder, please. Councillor Hooper. Discussion, councillors. Yes. Councillor Hooper. 4.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I comment on some of the achievements in this latest annual report to the community, I would like to acknowledge the efforts of our staff, as well as the portfolio holder, Councillor Heather Marcus. All lend their respective professionalism and passion to something that I know is highly valued by the locals I talk to. As I mentioned, we now provide an annual report on the environment. It is guided by Wyndham City's Environment and Sustainability Strategy, which is an active document setting the environmental agenda for our municipality until 2040. The overarching strategy provides short and long-term targets as we endeavour to move towards a genuinely sustainable future. This 2017-2018 State of the Environment report provides a snapshot of Wyndham's environment. It also promotes Council's environmental achievements and the progress towards targets set out in 3 key strategies this Council has had a big impact on. The strategies include the Environment and Sustainability Strategy 2016-2040, our Integrated Water Cycle Management Plan, and the Waste and Litter Strategy 2016-2040. Other councillors, I will no doubt will speak on the particular achievements that stand out for them. But here are the ones that stand out for me, particularly because they relate to the work we do to include our community in what is, after all, a shared challenge to improve our environment. 540 residents ordered compost bins, an increase of 53%. 313 residents took part in the pop-up recycling day, which diverted over 11 tonnes of waste from landfill. 46,000 items were collected in the reverse vending machines around Wyndham. And as part of the Waste Watchers program with residents in 17-18, overall the group reduced their waste going to landfill by 68%. At the broader level, there are two key achievements I want to mention, including that Council maintains and cleans more than 30 stormwater treatment wetlands and 70 litter traps across Wyndham, and Council installed a 337 kilowatt solar system at the Wyndham City Civic Centre above our heads. Returning to local community environment action, Mr Mayor, one pilot project that I also wanted to...
1 minute, Councillor Hooper.
Is the Gardening Champions program launched at Saltwater Community Centre in March this year. The aim of this pilot project was to give participants the opportunity to learn how to cultivate their own food and to encourage positive social interaction within the community. I'm told it was highly successful, and I hope many similar projects like it are run in the future. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillors, any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Being no further speakers, I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.5.2. Establishment of the Wyndham Community Grants Program Evaluation Panel. Report commences page 84, recommendation page 84, attachments page 90. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Gilligan.
I'll amend the recommendation to enable...
You're moving an amendment?
Yes.
That is?
Fill in number 4, so to keep provisions 1, 2 and 3 and add that Council appoints the Mayor, Councillor Peter Maynard as the Chair, and Councillor Marcus, Councillor Gilligan, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Shaw and Councillor Barlow to the Wyndham Community Grants Program Evaluation Panel.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Khan. Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. This is a further recommendation that was requested as per a notice of motion to consider as part of the recommendation council officers to come back with a report at the October OCM detailing the process of how we would implement the Wyndham Community Grants Program Evaluation Panel. This clearly outlines the commitments that were given as part of the notice of motion to ensure that decisions would ultimately be a matter for this chamber, all 11 councillors, but it would significantly alter the current process by enabling councillor input in terms of seeing any particular grant applications of the following streams that were outlined in this report. The previous process, as outlined, related to council officers ultimately making a decision by delegation, and this enables councillors to have oversight and awareness as to the type of grants that will be essentially awarded to certain community groups, or indeed community groups that are unsuccessful. The premise of why this was introduced and why we're here today is making sure that elected representatives of the community do have oversight of the grants program, and ultimately all 11 of us will decide the outcomes upon council officer recommendation. There are significant probity checks put in place here. There are conflict of interest provisions built in. There are significant safety barriers built in for those that raise concerns. I am glad to see that there are, as part of this recommendation, at least one of the 5 councillors that recommended certainly did have significant concerns about the policy, but I'm glad to see that that councillor is prepared to come on board as part of delivering a very strong panel that is got those key objectives in mind that I outlined in the notice of motion. So this is a good thing. It's a good thing for the City of Wyndham. It is a good thing for making sure that councillors are involved directly in their community. It's a good thing to not have to go to a community event and be told that the Wyndham City Council has funded it and not have a clue about it. It is a very, very good thing that we are making sure that we've got greater awareness around the types of the types of grant streams that we have, and also ensuring that we are directly accountable to the people that elect us. So this is a good outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilly. Councillors, any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers? Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, I just need to clarify that on page 99 of the guidelines, the terms of reference, it states quite clearly in the quorum and determination of recommendations, bullet point 4 quite clearly states that council staff will not vote. And in fact, if you read the previous 3 bullet points, it states quite clearly the whole recommendation is by councillors. So councillors will actually make the recommendation as to which grants go to which people, and then the council staff, if I've read this correctly, will go away and write up a report to council based on the recommendations of the councillors. So there is no review by council officers at the end of the process. So the whole concept of this grants program is that the councillors will decide which groups, which organisations actually get the money. Now, I'm on the public record of saying that I've been a big fan of the report as tabled and voted on by councillors back in 2014, of which Councillor Khan, Councillor Marcus, Councillor Maynard and Councillor Gibbons were part of, where they voted unanimously to accept the provisions that councillors stay at arm's length. Now, I'm a big fan of councillors staying at arm's length when it comes to dishing out money to community groups, because there has been a number of councils who have been, actually, some have been suspended, others have been given warnings, where councillors are actually directing funding to self-interest groups. Now, I'm not suggesting that anybody on this council would do that, but human nature being what it is a concern. So even though I've nominated to be on the panel, if this motion gets passed, I will be on this panel and I will be viewing what's going to happen very, very closely, even though I must say that I voted last time against the notice of motion that was put up, and I will be voting against this motion tonight also.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillors, any further speakers for this motion?
I just want to get a point of clarification. Is that okay, Mr. Mayor?
I'll allow.
So the point of clarification for me is that my understanding was that the panel would put forward the recommendations from the grants process, and it would go to council officers, and those grants would be assessed against all current policies around the grants process. Is that correct? That's not what I'm hearing at the moment, so I would like it clarified, please.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I will actually ask Director Jenny McMahon, Director City Life, to provide a response and just clarify exactly what's contained in the report in order for all councillors to be of the same understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam CEO, and through you, Mr. Mayor. In the attached document, it does refer to the panel making the report to council and making the recommendation. So in practice, my expectations would be is that council officers would undertake an initial assessment according to all the policies, as you referred to, Councillor Shaw. That, along with all of the grant applications, both those that the officers would be assessing as being successful or not successful, would go to the councillor panel, and then the councillor panel will make a final determination and take that to the chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further speakers against the motion? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, hang on, I beg your pardon. I just added one against. Four, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
My apologies. 4. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think it's an interesting one, and I know it's hard. Someone may be thinking it's going to have some problems and things like that, but I must, echo the voice of the Judge colleague in the rationale behind how it can benefit. It can be looked up in different ways, but I think it's there for good benefit and good governance. But I do take a point of the Councillor Henry Barlow, which is saying that, you're voting against, but I don't understand if you're voting against, then how you're nominating yourself. What you're literally saying, I'm happy to go on, but I'm going to vote against. It could be my misunderstanding, but I would say, look, it's a good way to think. We can disagree on a number of items, and they still can work together. This is a great example of it. A council does not agree with the principles, but nominating himself, which is a great way of working together in even having different views. Well, look, Mr. Mayor, I will be supporting this motion, and I did support it initially when Josh Gilligan bring that in first time and notice a motion. I think it will benefit, and we have to be open and see how it's going to work. It's only, it's my understanding, it's only for 1 year. If there's problems get in, always have opportunities to go back and, bring some sorts of different amendments to it. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Any further speakers against?
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure I'm either.
Oh, sorry, against. I just did. For, I beg your pardon. It's all right. It's been one of those days. Now for.
Oh, am I less?
Against.
I just wanted to make a comment, actually.
It's probably worth point of clarification given the points that have been made. And my correct interpretation is that a meeting.
Hang on a second. What are you doing? I've asked. You've already had a go. So I'm mucking up the for and against, but I've still got the floor.
I was for.
So you're for. So now against. Right. So who's speaking against, please?
I just want to make a general comment.
Well, I need to have someone speak against, if there is someone to speak against.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think the report, as rightly pointed out by Councillor Barlow, states, where opinion is closely divided, the outcome of recommendations from the councillor members will be determined by a simple show of hands, and the majority will show of hands unless otherwise requested, and that is a final recommendation that then comes back to the chamber. It is a serious concern of mine and has been expressed many times, as when I objected to this in the past, of exposing councillors to perceived conflicts of interest just by virtue of shaping how grant processes are done. Now, we've already seen the impact of this from councils such as Geelong and Brimbank. I do not understand why would we expose ourselves to such risk. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper, and my apologies.
That's all right, I understand.
Now, any further speakers? It's been one of those nights and days. Any further speakers for the motion? No further speakers for it. Any further speakers against it? Councillor McAloney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In August, I did not support the recommendation, and again, I will not be supporting tonight. As Councillor Barlow has stated, councillors need to have arm's length, and I won't say anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McAloney. Any speakers for this motion? I don't know that we've got any more left, but just in case, have we? No?
No.
No?
Make a comment.
Right. So we're all done and dusted.
I'd like to speak.
You would speak? Okay, yes.
I'm just making a comment, I think, generally.
Well, it's either for or against. That's what I'm asking.
Do you have to be for or against? What if I'm abstaining?
Well, then you're abstaining. So
Can I still comment or not?
You can abstain.
You can abstain. But there's either speakers for or speakers against.
Is that okay?
You can. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, look, I did support this motion originally when it came through, and because I do think, certainly from my point of view, and having discussions with some other councillors who were supportive of this, is that for me it was about getting more visibility of the grant applications that were actually coming in to this council that certainly from a ward perspective I was more interested in having a look at and getting a better understanding of what my community or what the community as a whole in Wyndham was actually looking for or what their needs were. And certainly from my perspective, the process or the current process is that we don't often see all of the applications. So from my point of view, it was always about getting more visibility about the community grants panel, of the community grants and what our community was looking for. And I'm still very supportive of that, and I would actually still like to see that happen. However, my understanding as part of this community grants panel was that they would not be making the final recommendation that comes into the chamber, that in fact that it would be kind of the opposite way around, that whilst the report comes into the chamber for all councillors who are present at the ACM to vote on it, that the panel would actually provide council officers a range of recommendations based on the community grants that they had seen, and then that those council officers would go away and assess those recommendations based on our current policies around our community grants process. Tonight, it seems like, in terms of the terms of reference, that is actually not the case, and that does leave me a little bit concerned about this process, because in my view, it should be really the council officers' last assessment of what we would like to see go through, and they need to come back based on the policies and provide us with a report that would then come into the chamber that we would agree on. So for me, I think the process is not quite right yet. So I suppose in talking to this motion, Mr Mayor, I'm probably going to be voting against it because I do not believe that the terms of references are quite the way I would feel comfortable in having them. And I'd be more than happy to go away and for all councillors to have a discussion about this again, because I still think the decision that was made in August still stands, even if this is not passed tonight, and that we may need to look at the terms of reference to make sure that they, in my opinion, are more reflective, at least in my view, in terms of what I'm looking for. I think I'm not comfortable with the terms of reference the way they stand tonight, but I am still supportive of the motion that I supported in August, and I would still like more visibility of our community grants and what comes through more broadly. So thank you, Mr Mayor. Sorry for the confusion.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw, and certainly I contributed to that confusion. So we'll just learn from it. So that's now. Has anyone else not spoken? I think we've got everyone. It's been a rather hectic discussion. So, all those in favour? Oh, sorry, you got the right of reply. I beg your pardon,
Mr Mayor. What I will say is it is a bit hypocritical for some to sit here tonight and continue to attack, and have not provided any amendments or proposals to get to this point. So that's the first point I want to make. On the second point, the document clearly states, and I agree with Councillor Shaw, that is my interpretation of this document. That is what I interpret it to say. A meeting of the full council will make final decisions about the annual community grants round based on recommendations of the panel. So my interpretation of that clearly says it ultimately is a decision for 11 councillors. All councillors will see all applications. There will be council officers that will have recommendations on the basis of the normal processes that they go down in each grant stream. That's my interpretation of the policy. That was the intent of the notice of motion. That is how I still interpret this. I don't quite see how there can be an alternate interpretation, but I accept that there is some, and so as a result...
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Barlow.
I take on board what Councillor Gilligan is saying, but I'd like him to actually point
please,
out
Councillor
where it
Barlow.
actually says
Councillor Barlow.
Well,
Give me the section,
says
please.
final...
Councillor Gillian, please.
Sorry. Council must not make statements that must mislead the public or make every effort to ensure the information they refer to is accurate. Meeting procedure protocol clause 24(1). I take on board what he's saying, but I would like to see where it actually says that.
Councillor Gillian.
Well, I don't have time to look up the Oxford Dictionary full definition of final, but my interpretation of final is that it ultimately relates to the 11 councillors that will ultimately vote on these applications. It's pretty clear there. It's got a headline that says final adoption, sorry, let me pull it up. Final adoption of grant rounds. A meeting of the full council will make final decisions about the annual community grants round based on recommendations of the panel. Now, my understanding is...
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. I have to agree.
Now, my understanding is that council officers will provide recommendations on the grants. Yes, the panel may have different recommendations, but it is ultimately a matter for the final 11 councillors, and there would be, I'm sure, very valid questions as to why a panel would make different recommendations to that of council officers.
1 minute, Councillor.
So it is intuitive to think that somewhere along the lines, these things probably, yes, in hindsight, probably could have been more clearly written out there. But it really, I don't know how you could get to an interpretation other than this will be a decision for a full council, as clearly outlined.
Item specific facts are incorrect. Council Code Conduct Clause 2.1.1. Every decision that comes to council is made by 11 councillors. I would argue, Mr Mayor, that 5 of the 11 councillors who have not read any of the grants paperwork or whatever are relying on the direction of the 6 councillors on the panel. And therefore, yes, of course, they'll vote, but it's based on the views of the previous 6. And they would not have actually read them and voted on them as to the positives and the negatives in a panel case. So, yes, there's 11 of us voting here. Well, 9 of us voting here tonight. 11 always vote, but we don't always vote on things that we know 100% or about a decision.
Well, we're assuming that everyone...
I certainly hope people do vote on things that they...
Even though I may get it wrong, I'm still controlling the meeting. So I'm assuming that all councillors, what Councillor Gilligan has said is all councillors will see the documents. Am I correct, Madam CEO?
That's correct, Mr Mayor. So again, if I could just make a point of clarification, just confirming again what Director Jenny McMahon has said. It's very clear in the terms of reference that the panel will make the recommendation to the council, the full council. However, ahead of the panel meeting, officers would make recommendations to the panel. It's very, very clear in the attached terms of reference that the officers would make a recommendation to the panel. The panel would then make their determination, and that would be the recommendation that ultimately goes into the council chamber, obviously with all of the material relevant attached.
And read by all councillors.
Well, presumably, Mr Mayor.
We're assuming. Okay, Councillor Gilligan, carry on, and you have 40 seconds, please.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. So again, on the key principles of transparency, accountability, any which way you look at it, it is a decision of all councillors. All councillors will have access to the material. All councillors will be requested to make a choice. It is not my problem if some councillors don't read their materials that they're handed, and frankly, they shouldn't
point of order.
If they don't read their materials.
Statement 3.1, likely to mislead. Aren't we in this situation already where these materials come through and we're supposed to read it?
Council.
Well, I hope you have read it.
And what Councillor Gilligan is saying is correct. Whether people read it or not is up to them. So can we move on?
Thank you. And so this really comes back to the original point. That is that there will be recommendations that are made of council officers, recommendations of the panel, and ultimately those recommendations come to the 11 councillors, and then the 11 councillors make the decision.
Thank you.
As they rightly should.
Mr Mayor, I do have to make a point of clarification. That is not how this terms of reference reads. It's very clear that the officers make their recommendations to the panel. It would be inappropriate, as per the terms of reference, to be putting council officers in an invidious position where there are 2 sets of recommendations going into the chamber. You're considering here resolving to appoint a panel with a really clear terms of reference. If amendment needs to be made to that terms of reference, that is another matter for council determination. However, as the CEO who's got a copy of the report in front of her, I'm very clear about what this recommendation is stating in terms of the terms of reference, and it is that the panel has recommendations made to it by council officers. They are then considered by the panel. The panel goes through all of that material and then is delegated to make a recommendation to the council chamber for all 11 councillors to determine.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Right. All those in favour of the motion? Against? The motion is lost.
Can I, Mr Mayor, a point of division?
A point of division, or you call for a division? You call for a division. Thank you, Councillor Khan. All those for? Councillor Gilligan, Councillor Ahn, Councillor Khan. Against? Councillor Gibbons, Councillor McAloney, Councillor Barlow, Councillor Maynard, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Hooper. Thank you. Item 6.5.3, August 2018 Financial Management Report Report commences on page 101, recommendation on page 101, attachments commence on page 104. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Khan, a seconder, please. Seconder, please. Councillor Barlow. Discussion, councillors? No discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.5.4. Council meeting dates 6.5.4 2019 council meeting dates. The report commences on page 117 with a recommendation on page 117. Attachments commence on page 120. Mover, please. Councillor McElhaney. Seconder, please. Councillor Hooper. Discussion, councillors? No discussion. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.5.5 Assembly of Councillors. Report commences on page 121 with a recommendation on page 121. Attachments commence on page 122. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Hooper. Seconder, please. Councillor John Gibbons. Discussion, councillors? No discussion. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 7, notice of motion, nil. Item 8, 8.1, construction of landfill cell 5, approval of additional costs. The report commences page 127 with a recommendation on page 128. There are no attachments. Councillors, could I have a mover, please? Councillor McElhaney. A seconder, Councillor John Gibbons. Discussion, councillors? Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council has commenced the construction of a new landfill cell required for the RDF to continue accepting waste from the Wyndham community and commercial customers. Work is proceeding in accordance with the EPR works received after a VCAT appeal earlier this year. The works approval has a number of requirements for the construction of the new cell that were not anticipated when the Mackenzie Environmental was contracted in 2016. These requirements include a groundwater collection system, an additional geotextile membrane, and increased testing and sampling. In addition, work is underway 6 days a week to make up for the lost time during the VCAT appeal. As a result of the new requirements, the scopes and the payments under this contract must be increased. It is important to note that these costs will not be borne by the Wyndham community, but will be passed on to future customers in the price charged to each tonne of waste received into the new landfill cell. While these extra costs were not anticipated in 2016, Council accepts them as part of its commitment to operating a best practice landfill with the highest environmental standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Councillors, any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? No further speakers. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. (8.2) Awarding of contract C195818 Tarneet West School Sporting Facilities Project. The report commences on page 133 with a recommendation on page 134. There are no attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Khan. Seconder, please. Councillor John Gibbons. Discussion, councillors? No discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 8.3 Awarding of contract C1969/18 Banbury Road Interim Upgrade Tarneet. Report commences page 140 with a recommendation on 141. There are no attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Barlow. Seconder, please. Councillor Ahn. Discussion, councillors? No discussion. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Moving right along. 8.4 Awarding of contract C1991/18 Construction of Wyndham Park Redevelopment Head Contractor. The report commences on page 148 with a recommendation on page 148. Attachments are printed in a separate document. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Khan. A seconder, please. Councillor Barlow. Discussion, councillors? No discussion. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Cracking through them at the moment. 8.5 Awarding of contract C1994/18 Construction of Truganina East Integrated Family Learning Centre. Report commences on page 155 with a recommendation on page 155. There are nil attachments. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Khan. Seconder, please. Councillor Ahn. Discussion, councillors. No discussion. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Boy, we're running out of them. 8.6, awarding of contract C1998/18, reconstruction of Gibbon Street, Grieve Street North and Wanderer Court, Werribee. Report commences on page 160 with a recommendation on 160. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Shaw. Discussion, seconder, please. Councillor Barlow. Discussion, councillors? No discussion, I'll put it to the vote. Niece, discussion. Councillor Barlow.
Look, not picking on this particular one at all, but these are very old streets, and some of them haven't been reconstructed or done any work to them for probably 20 or 30 years. And so I think it's great that not only are we looking at the growth areas and to expand roads to 4 lanes and all the things that go together with a growth council, but as a council we do need to go back and have a look at what's happening in the older parts of the municipality. And I can remember going back a number of years ago, we were going and refurbishing roads that hadn't been touched for nearly 30 years. And I think it's great that Gibbon Street, Grieve Street North and places like Wanderer Court are being looked at. And if I can just, with your forbearance, Mr Mayor, the previous 5 contracts just goes to show you how proactive this council is in infrastructure development, in looking at what needs to be done, whether it be the sporting facilities on 8.2 that you looked at, the construction of the Wyndham Park redevelopment or whatever, that we're getting on with business.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillors, any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? No further speakers. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 9, contract summary, nil. Item 10, questions with notice from the gallery. Madam CEO.
Mr Mayor, this evening we don't have questions from the gallery. Thank you.
No questions? Oh, okay. Thank you, Madam CEO. Councillors, item 11, Councillor Delegate's report. The report commences on page 166 with a recommendation on page 167. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor McElhaney, seconder, Councillor John Gibbons. Discussion, councillors. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to say a few things about the recent Family Friendly City portfolio meeting. So it was actually a good meeting, and I do want to thank the committee for putting in the time again to attend and participate. And I want to also thank council officers for the time they put into not only attending the meeting, but the organising that they do behind the scenes for these meetings. It does take up a lot of time, and I do very much appreciate it. So please pass on my thank you. There are a couple of things. Yes, there are a couple of things I do want to raise, and that we did discuss in the meeting, and I have also spoken to council officers about. One is after school care. So I believe we are starting to see some pressure on this service in our community, and to test that, council officers have started to do some work in this space so we can get a better understanding of how this service is tracking, if there are gaps and if there are any impacts to working families in being able to access or not access this service. I see this service, as well as before school care, as being critical for our community and working families. As a user of this service, for my son, it has been an important factor in staying in paid employment and taking pressure off my own family who assist in looking after duties. I have no doubt that this is the same for other parents. And the other issue I raised was looking into 2 new grants to support our growing community, which is sort of just interesting considering the conversation that we just had. But one was in relation to men's health. So I've had some discussions over the last little while in relations to men's health and wellbeing and the types of initiatives, or in some areas, the lack of initiatives that we do in our community that support men's health more broadly. So, and I know council officers are already doing some work in this space, but, you know, if you think about it, and I've had some of these residents come and speak to me, we only have 2 men's sheds in this community, and one of them cannot hold very many members at all. So, and they've been turning away people. So I do think it's time we looked at the types of initiatives and how we support that more broadly. But I would like to see a specific grant with specific money allocated to support these initiatives or ideas that support men's health specifically and their wellbeing in our community. And the other is a family-friendly sporting grant or grants to encourage more family-friendly type events or activities at sporting clubs. So we've seen a couple of ugly incidents at sporting events over the last 12 months, but that is more an exception than the rule. However, while these grants may not stop that kind of behaviour, it is about reminding people that sporting activities and events in our city are and should be family friendly. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor, any further discussion? Councillor McElhaney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm pleased to present the delegates' report on behalf of the Council's Audit and Risk Management Committee. This report outlines the key areas tabled for discussion at the 12th of September 18 meeting. The Audit and Risk Committee has actually met twice in the current 2018-19 financial year. The first meeting was held on the 22nd of August, and this was an out-of-sessions meeting and was the first chaired by our newly appointed Chair, Cathy Alexander. And this meeting allowed the Chair to meet with the new members of the Audit and Risk Committee, as well as Oakton's, our internal auditors. The committee was presented with a proposed 3-year internal audit program for Council and had the opportunity to review and discuss. The meeting held on the 12th of September was a regular quarterly meeting of the committee. The primary focus for this meeting was to review the annual statement of the 2017-18 financial year and make a recommendation to councillors that these be approved in principle at the special meeting of council, which was held on the 18th of September this year. In making the recommendations to councillors, the Audit Committee had an opportunity to meet with our Vargo appointed external auditors, HB Mann Judd, in camera, that is without council officers being present. The external auditors provided a clean, unqualified closing report and recognised the efforts by council officers in the timely completion of the accounts. At this meeting, the committee also endorsed a 3-year strategic internal audit plan for council and received the quarterly updates in relation to risk and compliance framework, integrity agency reports and any other updates in line with the annual work plan. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McElhaney. Councillors, any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 12, urgent business. There is nil. Item 13, confidential business.
Why is he coughing?
I've got a sore throat.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to put the motion that pursuant to sections 89/2 of the Local Government Act 1989, standing orders be suspended and this meeting of council be closed to members of the public in order for council to discuss.
Confidential business. Seconder, Councillor Khan. Discussion, councillors? No discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried.